This is a story of how an untreated mental illness can reach its limits, testing what we understand about reality and turning it into an unthinkable horror show. My name is Angie, and I'll be your host on this episode of Mean Streets Canada. Before we get started, I just want to mention that there are some disturbing details to this story, and if that's not for you, then it's time to click away. Also, I give credit to all the sources utilized in this research, including any pictures used to the originators. This is merely my interpretation of this case and was created for educational and entertainment. So click, likes, and subscribe, and let's get started. This is a case of Vince Lee, a diagnosed unmedicated schizophrenic who lost touch with reality while riding a Greyhound bus along a Trans-Canada highway. He shocked Canada and the world by his actions that went on to affect the lives of countless people. The victim, Tim McLean, was born October 3, 1985. He was returning home to Vancouver after working the carnival circuit as a carnival barker, basically a person paid to attract customers to the games or rides. Tim was departing Edmonton on the 1170 Greyhound bus. He sat one row from the bathrooms near the rear of the bus. He sat alone in his seat until 6:55 p.m. when the bus stopped in Erickson, Manitoba, and picked up one passenger, Vince Lee. Born April 30, 1968, resident of Victoria, BC, described by most as a tall man in his 40s of Canadian Chinese descent, sporting a cleanly shaven head and sunglasses. What most couldn't see is that Lee had suffered with mental illness throughout his adult life. As an untreated schizophrenic, the world appeared different to Lee. His reality, although altered, was as real to him as yours to you. There may have been times when he questioned it, but don't we all? Recently fired from his job at Walmart due to a disagreement with coworkers, Lee, having requested time off from his second job as a delivery driver to go to Winnipeg for a job, bought a bus ticket. Around noon on July 28th, Lee boarded the bus for Winnipeg, which made stops along the way. On July 29th, in Erickson, Manitoba, Lee got off around 6 p.m., staying the night on the beach. Witnesses had seen him sitting there, rigid as a board, eyes wide and staring at the water. On July 30th, 2008, Lee's depression had reached its depths. Vince Lee, 40 years old, boarded a Greyhound bus destined for Winnipeg. Typically, Lee was known to take a front seat on the bus, and he did until the rest stop. After reboarding, Lee selected a seat directly next to Tim. McLean, barely aware of his new seatmate, unassuming 22-year-old Tim sat next to Lee, catching up on some rest by napping. Tim had been leaning against the window, music and headphones on, as he drifted off to sleep, obviously having no idea of what was about to happen. The bus continued until just west of Portage-la-Prairie, Manitoba. Then, unassumingly and unprovoked, Lee pulled out a large knife and began stabbing the sleeping man, and would not stop until Tim was dead, with the majority of the jabs hitting Tim's neck and chest. He bled out quickly. While this was happening, the bus driver pulled over to the shoulder of the road to allow the other passengers to escape. There were a couple of passengers and the driver who had tried to save McLean, but all attempts failed as they could not get past Lee and his large knife, as he would chase them away, slashing violently at them with each attempt. Lee was now left on the bus alone, as the other passengers stood outside watching in horror. As Lee started to decapitate McLean, Lee then continued on his macabre mission, holding up the head, displaying it to the passengers. He then began to mutilate the body further, proceeding to consume some of the corpse. Yes, he started to eat him. Described by witnesses, there was no rage or anything. He was like a robot. He just kept stabbing the guy. The RCMP and Portage la Prairie were notified of the stabbing aboard the Greyhound bus at 8:30 p.m. and raced to the scene. Completely unprepared for what they were about to encounter. When they arrived at the scene, it was surreal. There, on the side of the road, they saw the bus truck that had stopped. Outside of the bus was sadness and desperation. The passengers stood clustered together, some crying, some in shock, others vomiting. The truck driver who had stopped provided a crowbar and a hammer to be used as weapons if needed, which he held both. At the time, when he and the bus driver both braced themselves against the door to prevent a caged Lee from escaping. This is something that Lee had tried to do several times, including an attempt to drive off with the bus and McLean, until the driver engaged the immobilizer, making the bus inoperable. Lee spent the remaining time pacing the aisle, dragging McLean's corpse with him, continuing to mutilate the remaining body and display it to the horrified passengers. A standoff between Lee and the RCMP began. The special negotiators and tactical units were called. Heavily armored vehicles arrived as the passengers were shuttled off to be interviewed at the RCMP station in Brandon, Manitoba. On site, the officers watched Lee continue to stab and slash at what remained, even observing him consuming pieces of the deceased Tim McLean, all the while repeating aloud, "I have to stay on this bus forever." At 1:30 a.m. July 31st, Lee attempted to escape through a window, breaking a pane of glass. Police clearly heard him and promptly shot him with a taser, 2 times. Lee was arrested by the RCMP officers at the scene, after being tased, cuffed, and stuffed into a cruiser. Later, he was charged with second-degree murder. The victim's parts were gathered and bagged, with his eyes and heart never being found, presumed eaten. In addition, the victim's nose, tongue, and ears were found in Lee's pocket. The scene was unreal, so shocking and devastating that one of the RCMP officers that were to arrive at the scene took his own life later due to the trauma. March 3, 2009, Lee answered the charges with a plea of not guilty due to mental instability. Heard in the courtroom uttering pleas for someone to kill him. After being tested and observed by a psychiatrist, it was suggested that Lee believed he heard the voice of God. God had directed him to kill Tim, and as he was the force of evil and needed to be executed. All this had played out in Lee's schizophrenic delusions while riding on the bus to Winnipeg. On March 5, 2009, his plea was accepted by the judge in support of the insanity defense. Lee was sentenced to a mental health facility in Selkirk, Manitoba, to undergo extensive therapy. At the time, Greyhound Canada pulled a recent advertisement running nationwide with the slogan, "There's a reason you never heard of bus rage," and numerous calls were fielded asking for increased bus security. Carol Dedeli, Tim McLean's mother, was astounded by the verdict, sentence, and release. Vocal about her concerns that there was no way to guarantee Lee would not go off his meds again, and that she does not believe for 1 second that Lee poses no threat. The McLean family sued Greyhound, Vince Lee, and the Attorney General of Canada for $150,000, which really doesn't seem like enough. Lee entered Selkirk, Manitoba mental health facility in March of 2009. By June 2010, Lee was enjoying supervised walks within the facility outdoor area. By May 2011, it was reported that Lee was doing well, and doctors had requested additional freedoms be added, with these freedoms being phased in over time. Only a year later, Lee was being granted temporary passes and leaving the facility with a peace officer or nurse. Admitting openly at this time that he had heard the voice of God since 2004, and that he was there to rescue people from the impending attack of aliens or be killed himself. Lee continued to progress through Selkirk's mental health program. He was gradually granted more unsupervised time and then requested a legal name change. Lee has since completed treatment and was released from the facility in 2015, allowed to live independently beginning in group homes. He has changed his name and goes by Will Biker. Found not to be criminally responsible for the actions on the bus, on the 10th of February 2017, he was granted an absolute discharge from the hospital and the doctor's care. This allows him to move freely, eliminating any opportunity for the system to ensure that he never goes off his medication. What happened on the bus that day was not only a tragedy, it was a living nightmare for everyone it touched, the effects of which will last their lifetime. My condolences go to the McLean family and the family of the RCMP officer so deeply affected. There are no words or understandable reason for an act like this. Be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. This concludes this episode. Please check back soon for another as we travel the mean streets of Canada. Also, if you don't mind, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much and have a good day.